I'm Bob Kerr. I'm a principal and co-founder of Pure Strategies. We're a company that works on sustainability strategy with companies, works on supply chain management, making the supply chains more sustainable, and assessing the safety and sustainability of products for them. Prior to consulting, I worked on Capitol Hill on legislation, on environmental and health legislation for almost a decade. And I also serve on EPA's Advisory Council for Environmental Policy and Technology. Because I think if you look at the products we buy here, they're not generally made here. A lot of the publicity disasters you hear about, because products have to be recalled because there are chemicals in them that are unhealthy or in some cases disastrous, come from our not knowing how to manage the supply chain, which largely comes from Asia, particularly from China, because that's where most of the manufacturing goods are. So if you really want to control the chemical safety and the product safety of the products that you use, your kids use, and so on, you really need to be managing the supply chain. And that's not something that our laws are set up to focus on, because our laws focus largely on things, how we make things, and they've been less able to deal with chemicals in products. Okay, the main thrust of the topic today was how do you motivate transparency in the use of chemicals that could or could not be hazardous, so that you know what they are. How do you motivate that kind of transparency in the supply chain? I think one of the major messages is that while it's an interplay between government regulation, demands by customers in the supply chain, major companies, whether they're retailers or manufacturers or brands in the supply chain, their demands for what they want their products to be that they make and sell, and an interplay with those and with NGOs that represent consumers, environmental concerns, that interplay drives a lot of the change. But given the locked up nature of politics and Congress and the government right now, is particularly become something that is driven by the customers of suppliers. Whatever the company is that's addressing or has decided that they're going to take a focus on chemicals and products, they have become the key drivers of bringing about healthier products and change in the system. And at least until we get more regulation in the future, a regulatory system that works, that's going to keep being the case. And even with a regulatory system working, there's a way in which companies, many of them, will go beyond anything that's likely to be regulated. If you're looking at chemicals and saying, well, we don't want chemicals which may cause, on the basis of the evidence we have, a risk to health, because there's some intrinsic hazard. The thing that didn't used to happen, if you went back a couple decades, is happening now. Companies are at the leadership. They are the cutting edge. So encouraging things that make that happen is what we want to focus on. The most important barrier to action is lack of understanding of what's going on in the supply chain. The supply chains are long, complex, interwoven in ways that we often don't understand. There are gaps in the information that come to us from the supply chain. No one, if you're dealing with a large supplier in China or Indonesia or wherever, no one brand, however large, is going to be the buyer for all the products from a gigantic supplier. That supplier is supplying companies in many brands, maybe in many different product areas. And so if you want to have an impact on that supplier, it has to be a collaborative effort so that multiple brands, retailers, or whatever, are having the same impact and sending the same message to that supplier and up through the supply chain. So it's an effort for collaboration to deal with that supply chain gap of information, gap of understanding. Sometimes we don't even know who the suppliers are back in the supply chain, much less what chemicals they're putting into products. It requires a collaborative, multi-company, multi-stakeholder effort. I think the collaborations that are happening now, there are multi-sector collaborations through organizations like the Sustainability Consortium. There are sectoral collaborations like the Sustainable Apparel Coalition, like the efforts involved in LEED with the U.S. Green Building Council. I think that those kind of collaborations are going to bring about long-term change, because what's happening is a combined effort involving many players who are focusing on different aspects of the problem and trying to deal with that problem. I think it's going to lead to creative solutions. I think it's going to drive companies not from a negative point of view primarily, but from the point of view of seeing opportunities for new markets, for ways to appeal better to consumers, a way to appeal better to their own direct customers, and that's going to change the marketplace.